What's up, my squids? Welcome to episode 24 of the PJF podcast. We got my guy, Max Shmarzo, in the building, and we're talking about the biggest diet mistakes. So the big mistakes that we've personally made when it comes to nutrition and training. Max dropped some gems in this episode. We also got into some different rants about motor learning, about constraints-led approach, how to build skill. So we actually ended up talking about a lot of different topics. We also ended up talking about Tiger King, of course, because how could you not? The legend of Carol Baskin, and a lot of other really good stuff. So be sure to tune in to the whole episode. You're not going to want to miss any of this. Let's get to work.
You're listening to the PJF Podcast, a show dedicated to decoding elite sports performance and fitness. I'm Paul Fabritz, and I'm an MBA strength and conditioning and performance trainer. If you want to become superhuman, take your fitness, and take your sports performance to the next level, this is the podcast for you. Let's do it.
That's the stuff that drives me crazy, man. And this is on rant. I apologize. I cannot stand, and this is against no one personally, so let's preface that. It's general. It's happened over the past 10 years of my life. Adamancy and endocrinology. People who think, oh, we can understand like the hormonal system very simply. It's really confusing. And there's differences between, different physiological significance versus p-value significance. So if I want to increase my testosterone levels, or if I want to increase my IGF-1 levels or my growth hormone levels, yeah, I can do this and sit in a sauna, but is that actually making it anabolic? If I want to increase my testosterone, I can just watch the highlights of myself and have a significant statistically increase in testosterone levels. But that's different than acute aggregation of the testosterone levels.
Do you remember the study that I brought up on the Edge U Talk about the babies?
Oh, you told me
that's the best one. If you hear a baby crying and you don't help it, you get a big testosterone boost. But if you hear a baby crying and you pick it up and you make it stop crying, you get a testosterone decline. These are legit studies. So yeah, don't take everything at face value and think like, oh, I'm going to become super jacked and my vertical jump's going to go up as long as I just don't pick up a crying baby.
So I got a group of friends, obviously they're pretty funny guys. And we're going through the testosterone studies, and they sent me a list of how to optimize your testosterone based on research studies. And this is literally from PubMed. So watching previous victory produces an increase in testosterone among elite hockey players. Having multiple partners are associated with higher testosterone levels in North American men.
I've seen that study.
Men committed in romantic relationships have lower testosterone. So having lots of partners and watching your highlights so far are two keys to having mass testosterone. And there's another one too in here. It's something like lifting weights. Like it's like heavy lifting. So it's like listening to loud music too, I think it was. And it's like the ultimate testosterone storm. And yeah, it's fun to talk about, and it's interesting from an acute physiological standpoint, because why might you not have higher testosterone levels when you're with one partner versus another? Well, what if you're assuming testosterone levels are associated with higher levels of sexual arousal and your ability to maybe infidelity or leave someone, with a massive assumption, by the way. The assumption would be if you're committed, they'd lower those testosterone levels because you're not actively signaling for another mate. Versus if you have multiple partners, you're currently signaling for another mate, which is why testosterone levels and aggression would be higher. Just like you would see some like rams or buffaloes headbutting out there in the wild over trying to get a mate, because that's why they do that. It becomes aggressive, it's hostile, and they're defending their territory. So there's like reasons why these studies are done, and a lot of them maybe sometimes are evolutionary and how that relates to humans. But then we take it and we're like, oh, you want to get jacked testosterone, like go have lots of partners. I'm like, well, that's not really the case.
You need to get 7 wives. You need to have a baby, but don't take care of the baby. Make sure it cries a lot, but don't do anything about it. That's the best way that you can increase your testosterone.
Yell at things. And also having lots of subordinates. And so it's like you're a boss, you have lots of subordinates, it raises your testosterone, because I think it's something to do with leadership or something the study was on. And so if you're like a ruthless tyrant and you have lots of wives and you have, watching your highlights all the time, you're going to be high testosterone yield.
Do you know whose testosterone would be crazy based on those studies? Have you watched Lion King?
I was gonna say Doc Antle.
Tiger King, Doc Antle. He's got like 9 young wives, and he's around lions all day. Like that's got to boost your testosterone for sure.
I was gonna surprise you. I was gonna say what? I was gonna have a quarantine questions at the end of this. What has Paul been watching? Tiger King.
Tiger King. That show is the MVP of the quarantine. Like, I don't think anybody's talked about anything more than that. Like, outside of the virus itself, it's Tiger King.
Tiger King has saved the U.S. stock market. It's removed the whole fear because everyone's like, the Tiger King's on. I got a little bit of optimism here. If this is what we're seeing to start 2020 off, I'm waiting for 2021. Netflix, what do you got next?
Right. 100%. And then, they released more episodes of, what's it called? Money Heist. Oh, have you ever? Oh, dude, it's the best show probably of all time. You got to watch Money Heist. And knowing that you haven't watched it, now you get to start at episode 1. I'm so jealous of you right now. You're gonna binge this for like the next week straight.
I almost put it on the other night. You know what I'm into? I have a guilty pleasure in watching TV. It's Curse of Oak Island. It's a show which has been going on History. By the way, I love History Channel because History Channel has like alien shows. It's like, why is this on History Channel? I have no idea. It's not a horrible show. It's a show they don't find anything ever for the past like 9 years, and they basically dig up this old treasure. They're trying to, apparently, and it's honestly, I spend an hour every week just in hopes they find some stupid treasure, and they never do. But I don't know what it is. And Kelsey is always, she like refuses to watch it. And if you listen to the History Channel, I want to get the guy who does the narrations on here. Because he's always like, could it be? It's like, so they're digging and they find like a stone. Is that, could it be a large stone found 30 feet beneath the earth? Is it from ancient settlers or something more menacing? And you're like, how do you draw that conclusion?
Right. It's like the ancient aliens, guys. Same thing.
The only logical explanation could be extraterrestrials. You're like, oh no, I think there's some other ones that you could probably piece in there.
It could be some other stuff. That's funny.
Is there a coincidence why it's a triangle pyramid and Mexico, China, and Egypt? Only explanation, extraterrestrials. Oh, that's great. We gotta get a live commentary of us watching one of those.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm currently taking applications for more Netflix shows. I've binge watched everything. Starting to get a little bit bored. I've been working on online stuff. I've been working on some EdU talks. It's funny that I dropped that online training video, the advice for online training, probably a week before quarantine hit. And now every single trainer's like freaking out trying to figure out how to do online training. I think that ended up being really good timing because I feel like a lot of our members saw that and immediately launched their online business or at least their hybrid, and then they're set in place because this thing is going to have lasting effects on the fitness industry. I mean, it's going to change it. It's going to change it forever. But I was listening to Mark Cuban interview where he was talking about like, yes, this is bad overall, but we're going to come back as like 2.0. And we're going to change a lot of things in society, and we're going to stop relying on China for a lot of things, and we're going to get into AI and robotics and whatever, and we're going to become America 2.0. And that's how I think of the fitness industry and the strength industry as well, is now everybody's thrown in the fire. The same trainers who I've been telling for the last 10 years, you need an online presence, and they're just like, oh man, yeah, I would love to, but I'm stuck in this, session to session and day to day. I don't have time. Now those same guys are forced to all of a sudden launch a hybrid program. And so now once we go back to regular training, you're now going to have those options. You're online, you're hybrid, you're in person, and you're going to have a better business model because of it. And so I think long term, this is going to help the fitness industry. I think it's like getting through the next 10 years for some of these bigger gyms is going to be really tough because they're in such big debt.
So here's the thing too, like we understood that. So we've been putting out a lot of content tips. We just actually released one today, content tips. And it's really important too, because I think there's going to be kind of, when the dust settles from this, certain people have taken this downtime, quote unquote downtime, time quarantine where they're stuck not doing what they normally do and have taken strides beyond what people expect. and other people's may have sat still. And what you might have is a massive discrepancy between the two fields. And so you can have people who are going to hope things return to the way they are. They're going to hope clients are going to come back in person. But I think as Cuomo said, the necessity is the mother of innovation. And what's happening right now is we're in necessary times to do certain things. And if you don't have those videos made, you can still make them at home, right? It doesn't need to be perfect. And that's what we talk about in our content tips is there's this extreme want to be perfect, but that's not the idea. It's about doing something that you can learn from and leverage in the future. And so everyone, you get these people, oh, Max, oh, why would I post something online? That's stupid. Why would I have, an Instagram page? Why would I put stuff on YouTube? Why would I put stuff on Facebook? And now they're going, oh, why didn't I have stuff on my Instagram page? Why didn't I have stuff on YouTube? And the thing is, you don't know you need it until you need it. It's kind of like an extra tank of gas in your car or having a spare tire. You don't need a spare tire, but when you need a spare tire, you need a spare tire. My God, you don't have an option. And so I think what EDU is doing right now is really cool is we're taking the times and we manipulate our page to give you the information that's relevant. Yeah, we could sit on there and chat about for days in all these scientific methods of programming and stuff, and we still provide that. But we understand coaches right now are trying to learn the basics. What's a Hootsuite? How do I schedule tweets? How do I upload something on YouTube and have it in the public not see it? Oh, it's unlisted. And so all these little things you would never know if you hadn't been on there before, we're providing these little content tips to get through.
Yeah. No, 100%. Even the most simple questions that I've been asked for the last 10 years of like, but how do I do online training? Like, how do I do a PDF? Do I launch an app? Like, what do I do? And I kind of walk you guys through the steps of like, this is what you need. This is what would be the fastest. This is what would be the best long-term. And that's the one like hurdle that people they get the paralysis by analysis and they just never end up doing it. But I'm trying to just provide you guys with some really easy, actionable steps where you can launch that program. And again, like that could be online, that could be hybrid. This could be for your in-person clients who you could say, hey, can you pay me half price? And we're just going to move to this hybrid model where we do FaceTime workouts or whatever it is. There's so many different ways where you can continue to get paid and keep your business going because you may not understand this, but your clients do want you to live. If you have a good relationship with your clients, they still want to pay you. Now more than ever, they need to stay in shape. They need you and you need them. So now isn't the time to be like, hey, our gym isn't open and so we're out of business, and then come back and try to start your business brand new a year later. It's not going to happen. For anybody in the fitness industry, I would treat this like it's going to last a year. It may not, but I would make the steps right now this week as if this is going to last another year. Now, how do you survive?
Or it's going to happen again. You're going to see a lot of these gyms start to offer pre-recorded, exercise classes, pre-recorded one-on-one training sessions. Mm-hmm. But everyone's going to do that here in the next 6 months. So how can you see it coming? Because what's going to happen, two things are going to happen. There's demand for it right now. But the demand for it isn't as known as it could be or should be because those clients haven't even experienced it. Then you're going to have forward-acting gyms who are going to do this at a large scale, like an Equinox, who reach large critical mass populations, and the demand is going to mushroom. And then you're going to have people retroactively try and catch up with the demand. If you can see it coming now, which it's inevitable because if it happens again or anything like this, you now have at least the framework to act in this environment. Because what you just found out right now is your brand robustness or your business robustness is very narrow. It's just like motor learning. You can't shoot when the crowd's yelling at you because the issue is you don't have that infrastructure. But now you can have that infrastructure ahead of time. And whatever happens, digital evergreen material is only going to appreciate in value, especially as you accumulate new material on it. So it starts to synergistically work. An example is, oh, Max, I don't have any exercises to put in. But the guy who has 20 exercises and the guy who has 300 exercises, the guy who has 300 exercises not just has more content, but it's so much more versatile because he can manipulate all those 300 into different programs for different people versus the guy with 20 can only do the one program that those 20 exercises have.
Right. No, 100%. Now is the perfect time to literally pull out your cell phone and start filming. It doesn't have to be the craziest high quality. Like, literally, I keep in mind, I launched my first online program by propping a phone up on a cone and then doing exercises, hoping that I was in the frame, and then going back and just editing on iMovie, upload it, unlisted to YouTube, put it to a PDF, and there's the program. Like, that's how I started, and it sold, and obviously I've scaled up since then, but that's where you can start right now and just start working with your clients and send them literally videos from your phone. And then you have the infrastructure for a hybrid program on the back end. So then once we go back to normal, Carol, who drives, not Carol Baskin, not to be confused.
Hey, cool cats and kittens. Paul's training Carol Baskin.
She's on the vert code. Carol's on the vert code.
She's on 3.0. She's on the new. She's the beta test.
Oh man. Wow. Okay, so Carol, who has to drive an hour to see you, and she hates training with you because she has to drive so far. Well, now Carol I can't get over Carol Baskin on the vertical jump program.
It's docking. I told on it. You got all these.
It's going viral.
Carol Baskin on your vertical jump program.
It's going viral in the tiger world right now.
They saw a tiger how to land like a cat, and they're like, "It might be for me."
That's probably what made it go viral. I did the cat video. Yeah, that's why Carol's on the vert code. No, but look, Carol has to drive 50 minutes to see you, and she biked, and she got sniped the whole way. People were shooting at her the whole way. So it's a hassle for Carol to come risk her life to get to your gym to train. Well, now Carol can only come one day a month, and I can't get this out. The rest of the time, she can be on your hybrid program doing the videos at home because you set that infrastructure right now.
Work hard enough, you might get to a blue T-shirt.
Right. Oh my God.
100%.
Yeah.
There's so much to it, and people, it's an interesting time because you'll actually see immediate value out of it. Normally, you don't see any immediate value, which is why no one does it. Because you do something, you're like, oh, this shit sits in my YouTube page forever. But now you're gonna get immediate value out of it, and because people are trying to find it, people are trying to access it. You can do fun, unique ways. You have a following, you get Instagram Live going. You can have a lot of things you can do to help build your infrastructure for whatever you might do next. And I just actually literally made a talk on this. I think it's coming out tomorrow or the next day. And by the time you guys listen to it, it's probably out already. It's about paralysis by analysis and how you should just do instead of thinking about doing, and the issues with making a plan that's so exact. Because if you have an exact plan, there's only one success and an infinite number of failures. People want to make an exact plan all the time. Don't make an exact plan. Have a loose-fitting plan that's able to be changed and flexible.
I want to take a quick time out to mention that this podcast is sponsored by EdgeU. This is our brand new educational platform for trainers and coaches. We make your life easier. We send out a weekly review of studies, recent studies that we feel like you should be aware of. But we don't only just include the studies, we also give a brief breakdown of what you need to know from those studies so you can pack in more information into your brain with doing less work, which is very important for coaches and trainers. This is also the platform where we put our presentations. So the presentations that people pay hundreds of dollars to come see, we put it all up on EdgeU. We have shorter videos, we have articles, we have things like a book club, and we also have a forum where we can communicate and go back and forth, and other trainers can connect with each other. Max Shmarzo and I have put a lot of work into the EdgeU platform, and we really believe if you're a trainer, a coach, or you're trying to get into this industry in the future, EdgeU is going to significantly help you take your craft to the next level.
Well, their whole backbone of all, like majority of their performance is motor learning. And so if you read some of the stuff, it's a lot of like, how can I get the muscles to do this so the brain can organize it? It was always a respect that the brain organized movement, and it was never this physiology first. In America, I think maybe it's because of research or how money's been distributed. It's always been physiology first. And we're so busy like muscle fiber types and how big is your muscle? And they were always, how do we measure skill acquisition? How do we measure force expression? And that's where the whole measuring how fast you can relax versus how fast you can contract wasn't a means of saying, oh, this is some magical way that you're like more athletic. It was a way of saying, oh, you're so skilled, you don't waste energy excessively contracting a muscle. So it's actually under the motor learning section of that paper. So it talks about like the next one is like doing eyes closed stability stuff in that paper. And that's because it helps other systems, like your sensory motor get better at adapting to movement than it would if you just didn't exercise with the eyes open. But again, it was all motor learning, how to become skillful. And they didn't differentiate force and strength and skill. It was always about skill and that being a unified kind of thread. It's kind of cool.
Right. Yeah, there's some interesting, we should do an Edu talk actually on the proprioceptive benefits of blindfold training. That stuff is really good. I started digging a little bit deeper into it, and the professor from ASU, what's his name, Rob Gray?
Yeah, that one I sent you?
Yeah. So I've been listening to his podcast.
Let me take credit.
It's all you. No, he did a podcast on that, and he's talking about how it could potentially be good in that realm, but when you take it sport specific and people do like blindfold shooting, you actually get significantly worse. So it's one of those things where like it's good in the strength side of things, but once you start getting too overly sport specific with it, there's actually a detriment. I think he brought up like 3 different studies which showed you shoot worse after blindfold training than without it, which makes sense.
It's because like if you think about it, like, well, first off, it's so specific, right? Like you're saying, if you're playing the sport, you don't want to mess with your sporting ability, but you want to train a system, not the system as a whole, and train a system at the same time. Right. So yeah, do you want to get better at knowing where your limb is in space? Of course, but is that the time to do it when you're shooting a jump shot? Probably not.
Right.
Like,
yeah. The thing is, you can take pieces of it, just not the whole thing. So like with the blindfold training, he goes on to say, hey, in skill acquisition, maybe you want to go blindfold for a moment. Maybe you want to take away certain pieces of information. So like the dribbling goggles where you can't see down, but you can see forward. Like maybe that's a good way to dribble without seeing the ball. So you're not necessarily going all the way blindfold. You're just taking out pieces of it. Or like I'm trying to teach somebody to see see the wing guy on the pick and roll. And so I'm going to blindfold like a certain area of the court. Like you can't see what's going on here. You can only see what's going on here. It's like a constraints-led approach where now you're forced to see that.
Yeah, it's super. I listen to Rob Gray stuff too. I love that podcast. It's like the most underrated podcast I listen to, and so every time I'm like, dude, this is awesome. Because he puts all the links and the papers. I'm going through it. And one he was talking about was the Nicola Bernstein one I sent you about degrees of freedom. And just the concept that there's so many ways you can do a movement. His example is like, how are you going to pick someone up off the floor or pick up a cup? You can bend your torso and keep your arm straight. You could keep your torso straight and bend your arm. You could move your wrist and then bend your arm and your torso at the same time. And he's like, the brain has so many options. The ability to use those options is important, but the ability to address those with constraints might develop certain areas better. So you get in a habit of always picking up in a certain way, of always looking down when you dribble. And no matter how hard you try, you just can't break it because that's natural to you. Well, if you add the constraint of, hey, I can't physically look down, now you're training the body to have to keep your, at least vision, not there. In a way, it's a constraint. So you take the environment and say, hey, you can't do this anymore. You can't, look down. And now you're training the skill of actually dribbling without looking at the ball. But indirectly, you're not saying don't look at the ball. You're saying, hey, you can't. You physically can't.
Exactly. I've been using that concept so much. I'm training my little guys, my little nephews. And so little one's 10. And, I've tried everything at some point in time of like, I'm going to be the guy who gives you a lot of details. I'm going to teach every little detail of skill. And now with them, I find that it's way more beneficial when I just use a constraints-led approach and I don't teach anything. But it's like, okay, every time that he wanted to change directions, he crossed over. And it's like, okay, how do I get him to now go between the legs or behind the back because it's a little bit safer? Well, I'm just going to get on him, play up, and then every time he crosses over, I'm sitting in that pocket. I'm sitting in that lane. And so now he's forced to go between the legs. Now he's forced to go behind the back. Like I'm trying to get his ability to shoot an extension shot. And so it's like, okay, I'm just going to ride on his side and I'm going to block everything that he shoots. And there's only one option. At some point, it's like, okay, I have to extend. And so then after they get that correct, like he started hitting extension layups, he started going between his legs. And then you go backwards and now you go, oh, did you see what you did? You got it out here. So then you make it aware of what they did, but they didn't learn it through words and through details. They learned it through necessity. And that's when you learn it through necessity of like, I just have to feel my way through this, it sticks at a whole nother level. And then you go backwards and you kind of start to teach that. And that's why I think we always, in skills training at least, we always try to teach skills, and we teach a drill with skills in it. And so we have them do this drill, but really we're trying to teach a certain skill. I don't think it works like that. I think you have to teach the skill and give them that context, right? Like the thing with the extension. I can't teach a drill for the extension layup. I got to show them how to use it. And then you go backwards and you go, okay, do you understand why that works? And then you go, okay, now let's do extended mic and drill, because now they have the right context. So go ahead. Interesting
too was when I shot when I was little, my dad was a really good basketball player and big time shooter. And so I always shot with 6 fingers because you grew up when the hoop's too tall for you. So you use both hands basically. Yeah. And I ended up breaking my left wrist playing basketball. And so he was like, all right, you're 7th grade. You're going to learn how to actually shoot the ball now. And what was interesting is how he taught me. And I didn't really appreciate it at the time because I ended up actually crying when I was doing it because I got so frustrated. Yeah. But he basically lowered the hoop. And what he said, because you see a lot of coaches, and I'm not dissing on anybody, and this isn't supposed to be a diss at all, but they do like this passing drill where they pass like and snap the wrist straight ahead. The issue is the wrist action's kind of there, but passing and shooting are different force vectors. Mm-hmm. Like one's vertical and one's a different level of shoulder flexion. And the other one is really wrist dominant in a horizontal projection. And so what he did was, I'm not going to change your arc or your trajectory. I'm going to make you shoot from like 1 foot away. And until you can maintain it from 2 feet, 3 feet, and 4 feet, you can't go back. And so I spent weeks at shooting like 4-foot shots on like a 9-foot hoop. And the whole idea was he didn't want to disrupt the motor pattern of shooting. So I still had to shoot the ball like I would shoot it, but he would change the environment in which I was shooting it into. So if my strength and my capacity wasn't able to maintain good form at a 10-foot hoop, well, he'd lower it to 9 feet and say, okay, well, you're going to practice on 9 feet. Or he'd say, you got to be really close and you got to make it. And so once you can shoot 4 feet away, okay, with that same form, you're going to now stress it by shooting a free throw. But at no point in time was it this, develop this one motor pattern and try to transfer it. And that got me really thinking is I had a buddy who was a really good shooter and a buddy who wasn't a great shooter. And one was he grew up, and my dad did this too, was we weren't allowed to shoot on a big hoop, especially my little sister. She was really good, but she quit on a big hoop until you could shoot with good form. So they'd practice with, even though she's playing on 10-foot hoops in like 3rd grade, which is ridiculous for a little girl. Like she has to huck it at the hoop. They'd practice on an 8-foot hoop. And it was kind of cool because it was like, no, I'm not going to screw your form up. Like, yeah, you're going to go play on a ridiculously tall hoop, but trust me, in 5 years, you're going to thank me. Right. And so I think we see that a lot, these ideas of, hey, these are good ideas of like teaching a motor pattern, but we can't just take the wrist snap and assume that's skill learning. You can't take a 2-ball dribble and assume that's contextual dribbling with a guy trying to steal it from you. Right. Because there's so much more that goes into it. I was a great 2-ball dribbler. I made turnovers all day when I went to the paint. 2 different worlds, right? I could dribble and do all the cool that Steph Curry used to do, the 2 balls, and you dribble one around the leg and the one behind the back. I looked great in warm-ups. But you get a defender on me, and I didn't understand. It's not about really necessarily the speed of dribble as much as it is how you're protecting the dribble. Exactly. It's not, again, the shot. It's not like the snap of the wrist, or it's not one thing, but it's the entirety of how do I shoot it. And then how can I now take that set shot and make it a fadeaway? How can I build off of it but keep the central motor pattern? It's a pretty cool concept.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a very simple concept, but I feel like, I don't know, we've kind of gotten lost in like drills. We've gotten lost in like, let's build skills through drills, when in reality, like, you got to use a constraints-led approach and let them understand kind of the necessity of it and give them that context, and then you can reverse engineer it, then go backwards and teach a skill to reinforce that pattern. But the other thing that Rob Gray talks about is like the link between movement and intent. And obviously we see this in like the agility science all the time, where it's like when there's no action, when there's no reaction, the movement ends up becoming different. So like you going through agility ladders, even if you feel like you're making the same cut, it's a very different biomechanical cut than if you were making a reaction to somebody. And so like when you change the intent in the brain, you may not know it, but you're changing the movement as well. So like I may do a crossover, and I do this sometimes with my players, but crossover and go down and touch the floor. And we're reinforcing that pattern of dipping the shoulder and being low, etc. But that movement is very different than when somebody's reaching in and I'm trying to get low to get by them. So just because it feels the same and it looks the same, it's actually a different motor pattern because it's starting at a different area in the brain.
I've always thought about that too. Like how we change our environment as opposed to trying to change the skills. Like you're saying, instead of cutting one way or the other, maybe I cut against an athlete who's slower or who's lower level, and then, I cut against or try to get open against someone who's faster. Like I have a theory, like some of these guys like Steph Curry and Damian Lillard, that maybe they wouldn't be pros if they immediately went to like a Duke. Because when they went to a low-level school, they had so much pressure on them to carry a load that was beyond that what they would have to carry at Duke, that their environment forced them. They were allowed to take bad shots or difficult shots. They were allowed to make plays that if at Duke, you got another McDonald's All-American on the bench coming in. And so these guys who are prolific scorers, like really big-time scorers, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Dame Lillard, you look at them and they weren't –
James Harden, ASU, yeah.
They didn't go to Duke where they had a bench full of 20 people. They didn't go to Kentucky. They go to these schools where they're that dude, and they have to go get buckets, and no matter what, they got to find a way. And so what's interesting, though, is they're also playing against lesser players in practice. And you might say, oh, that's bad. You don't want to play against a lesser player. If you are not good at a step back and you have to learn to step back against a McDonald's All-American, you're going to not do it. It's not going to be successful. You're going to be like, this sucks. This is stupid. But then if you do it against a guy who's not as good, and then you get good enough, they do it in a game, so now you're building into it. It's like going to try and immediately climb Mount Everest and you haven't even climbed a hill. Right. Or these guys get exposed to lower level athletes and players, which isn't a bad thing because now they have so much freedom to try new stuff. And you watch it like Patty Mills in college. He obviously isn't the prolific scorer that in the NBA, but these guys just could take shots that were like, oh my God, like I can't imagine, Jimmer Fredette taking that shot at Duke or something. Yeah. Some of the best, like quote unquote scorers in college basketball. It's pretty interesting to think about it that way. And maybe some guys should, like, if you're trying to develop a skill, go play JV practices in high school. And that's where you say, all right, in this JV practice, you're shooting 20 step backs. Like you go in there and you're going to shoot step backs all day. Yeah. And that way they can do it in an environment that's not as demanding or scary or nerve wracking. They feel like if they miss, they're going to get pulled. They're going to lose. There's a psychological factor involved. So, right. I mean, it's a pretty interesting concept.
Yeah, that's the whole LaMelo Ball concept. Everybody was like, oh, he needs a structured system. But Chino Hill's like, you just run and you throw up shots and he shoots half quarters. And like that freedom developed who he is as a player. Now he's so intuitive and he's so natural as a player. And then you go backwards and you build that structure and you kind of learn team ball, etc. I mean, I think you need a good balance of both, but I agree. Like, I don't think he's a top 5 player in this year's draft if he grew up in a structured system. We talked about on the last podcast with Shea Frazee, he was talking about, so every time you add a player, you get 20% more social responsibility for each shot. So like 1-on-1, you don't feel bad shooting a bad shot. You only let yourself down. 2-on-2, you feel a little more bad because you let the other guy down. 5-on-5, you feel really bad when you shoot a bad shot because you let 4 other guys down. But Steph Curry, a bad shot at Davidson was still their team's best shot. And so he built what Shea refers to as irrational confidence, where it's like, even my bad shots are good. And when you get a certain amount of reps with that, you become who Steph Curry is today. So I agree 100%. I like that theory.
Yeah, guys, and if they go play pickup too, don't always play with your friends. Like, I mean, I know I'm kind of an asshole at times, but we would joke, and I went to a pickup game, and it was I don't remember, it was open gym in college, and I walk in there, and I don't think it was college, I don't remember where it was, somewhere I was playing, and I had one friend of mine, I walk in there and go, I didn't come in here to pass the ball. If you don't want to be on my team, I'm cool.
Yeah.
I didn't show up here to go, get 12 assists in a pickup game. I'm here to work on my skills.
Right.
And that's actually how, like, if you look at teams and how they play pickup and open gym, it should be like, when the guy's out there trying to, you want to win a game, obviously, playing pickup, but that's not the time to only take good shots. You got to explore your craft a little bit.
Yeah. Same thing with AAU. Like, there's a lot of high school teams where it's going to be a little bit more structured. But AAU, that's your time to kind of go out and just get buckets and do your thing. But if you go to an AAU team where you're the eighth man, like, is that really the best option for you? That's probably your time where you should go to a lower level team and just ball out. But anyways, we got kind of deep on that. We're talking about something completely different today. We're talking about nutrition, the biggest mistakes that we've made. So I'm going to give my top 3. You give your top 3. We can go 1 and 1 and just alternate. So you want to start that off?
Mine's kind of a story. So if you want me to go first, they kind of all connect.
Perfect.
I used to be very heavy in middle school. However you want to call it, obese, whatever. And I lost weight. I didn't know how to lose weight. I just knew eating less was the specifics of it. And so I had some experience at a young age to lose weight. And I was like, oh, eat less food. Pretty simple. But then I got into high school and college. And I always, for some reason, associated athleticism with being lean. Because I saw these guys in the NBA and be like, oh, man, look how lean they are. I'm not as lean. I wasn't fat by any stretch of the imagination. I was probably 12, 13% body fat. But these guys are like 5. So I was like, oh, I'm not lean enough. And so what I did was I started to read magazines, which is dangerous, not articles, magazines. And I was like, okay, carbs are bad, which is a huge mistake. And then I thought, I'm going to lose weight by training harder, which was another mistake. So I made 2 big mistakes. First off, I took a really important nutritional macronutrient in your carbs, which are your fast. It's your fuel. It keeps you going, especially if you're going to lift weights and run. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to run more long distance and train in like a high intensity manner to lose weight, which then means I took my training time that I'd otherwise dedicate to lifting weights to losing weight. And so what happened was I started to think about it in terms of weight and not body composition, which is a big difference. Mm-hmm. So if I wanted to maintain my muscle mass and maintain my strength and lose some body fat, the recipe for that is not to work out in a high intensity manner. Yes, working out's healthy, but if you're already an athlete, you're already working out. It is to then eat probably a little bit less, but also increase your protein intake during this time and continue to resistance train and actually probably increase your rest intervals to make it less high intensity interval training while you're resistance training because you might be in a little bit caloric deficiency. Exactly. So what happened was I snowballed. So I would lose this weight and I can lose weight fast. I lost 15 pounds. I was down to 178 and I played at like 200 normally. So I was down to 178 and I was lean, I was shredded, and I looked great in the mirror. But I couldn't have any pop in my step. I couldn't dunk a basketball. I could hardly touch the rim. And I remember thinking, man, I wonder I'm just not built for this. And then we did our strength testing, and I couldn't squat 300 pounds. And it was because I lost all my strength spending so much time trying to lose weight. And for some reason, I was so stuck on weight that my dietary mistakes led me to change my body, not even change my body composition. I was probably still like relatively not muscular compared to what I wanted to be.
Right.
So those are kind of big mistakes for me, is getting caught up in stuff.
That's hilarious because that's my number one, is that exact same story. And my whole life, I've kind of gone back and forth on this because I don't have the body type to naturally be really thin. My body type, like, I want to build muscle. If I step in the weight room, I could build muscle pretty easy, but I gain fat pretty easy. And so for me, like, my best dunking weight is 180. But if I don't work out much, or if I start falling off my diet, I'll blow up to 200 pounds really, really quick. And so I'm always trying to get back down to that 180, but it becomes tougher and tougher. And what I find is when I try to do like rapid weight loss, It's like you're talking about, you lose muscle mass, you lose strength, you test yourself on the force plate, your force goes way down, and your athleticism goes nowhere. More importantly, you start kind of building up these little overuse injuries because you need enough calories, you need enough nutrients to bounce back from a workout. And so now, normally you could handle lower body Monday, Wednesday. Now Wednesday, you're still dead. And so now you can't train until Thursday or Friday again. And so your frequency goes down. If you are stubborn, like a lot of athletes, when you're cutting and you're taking back those calories, you try to stick to that same intense schedule. You keep the same frequency, you keep the same volume, and you just start getting these overuse injuries, tendinopathy, little mild grade 1 muscle strains, because you're still going in and hitting it hard, but you didn't have the adaptive energy to even recover in the first place. And so that's something that I've always gone through. What worked for me is when I started realizing, okay, I can't have this all-out approach. Like, I need to lose 1 pound per week and nothing more. And some people could go 2 pounds, but like what I used to do is, all right, I'm going 4 pounds, 5 pounds a week, and I'm just going to strip down and get to my goal faster. But with that comes muscle mass. And then with that comes metabolic rate going significantly down. And then you have a couple days where you go cheat and you're all of a sudden blowing back up and gaining back that weight, if not a little bit more. So now you're weaker because your training sucked for the past 2 months. And now you end up being fatter than you were in the first place. And so that's how athletes really ruin themselves, is they constantly go in this cycle, when in reality, if you just kicked up your protein to closer to a pound per gram of body weight, or sometimes for weight loss, potentially even a little bit more.
The two, they say, yeah.
2 is huge, but
it's like 1.5. It's 2, 2 per kilogram or something like that.
Per kilo. Yeah. No, it's a lot. It's a lot of protein. So when you kick that up and then you take down calories, it's a lot different because you can maintain that muscle mass much better. Now, will you build muscle? At the same time, this is the mistake that a lot of people make, is they try to build a lot of muscle while they're losing fat. I think you can if you're a beginner, obviously, and you can if you're like us, where you've been training forever, but you got way out of shape. So like after my honeymoon, I stopped training for a month and a half and I was eating like crap. Yes, I could take down my calories and still build muscle at the same time because I was so untrained. So that's a situation where recomp is very possible. But for like the more elite athletes who are already in shape and they're trying to strip down, don't get mad at yourself for not being able to build muscle at the same time. You might lose a little bit of muscle, but you want that to be very, very slow and gradual.
And losing muscle doesn't mean that if you're losing body fat with it, don't think about gaining muscle, because you're now changing your body comp by just maintaining muscle.
Exactly.
So like people go, oh, I'm not, keep track. My thing is too, is most people go, oh, I can't measure my muscle. What does that mean? And I don't have any devices. Don't lose your 1RM strength. That's a big thing for me. Is I recently decided to lose. I weighed in this morning at 216. Last time Paul saw me, I was 236. And I decided to lose basically 20. I was kind of get down to maybe 210. And I wanted to do it in a way that was educational for myself, because I've kind of failed at this many times in the past. And my semi-scientific tips are as follows. 1, still lift heavy, right? I could bench 350, 330, 40, something like that when I started at 236. And I could bench the same weight when I was done, a little bit more. So I kept lifting heavy. And I'm not saying like, oh, you need to bench a lot or squat a lot. Just maintain the strength that you have. Yeah. Secondly is, don't be afraid to be the same weight for a week. And what I mean by that is, people think about lose, maintain, get used to that weight, and then lose again. And so what I would do one time in the past is I had a calendar and I took my weekly average of weight loss, because I didn't want my average weekly weight loss to be below like 3 pounds. And so some days I'd come in, because I'm not doing I'm kind of a knucklehead. I'm not like on my phone counting calories or counting how hard I worked out. And so I'll weigh in one day like 3 pounds lighter. Okay, that's not good. Make sure I eat enough today. So then I have the ability to go up and down, but at the end of the week, I'm only 1.5 pounds less. So I tally it all up and I average it divided by 7. So I do that, and then I'll say, okay, I want to maintain for this week. And then also on top of that, it's how do I eat more protein? Because you need to eat protein. There's things for systemic health for it. There's things for maintaining muscle mass. That's important. And they talk about losing weight and maintaining muscle mass is really similar for like an older adult trying to gain weight. It's protein's anabolic, and then also lifting weights are anabolic, and these two universal concepts. And then my last one is not to train to lose weight. I'm not out here hitting extra conditioning. Yeah. I'm not hitting extra side shuffles. I'm not getting on the battle ropes because I'm already stressing my body by not eating enough. Why would I all of a sudden dump another thing on it and say, I'm going to now work really hard. I'm going to work harder than I've worked in my whole life. Yeah. I'm going to train my hardest, and I'm going to eat the least amount of food I've had in the past 6 months. Yeah. That sounds like a really dumb idea when you put it on paper. And one thing too, nutrient timing becomes bigger. Now, you don't think about this when you're eating all these calories before, like normal. What happens is, especially for common fads, we go, oh, we got to cut calories out. I'm going to cut some carbs out because typically we eat a lot of carbs. Those are our snacks. And by nature, if you're cutting down calories, you're probably going to eat less carbs. It just happens because you're eating less food, which means be cognizant of when you ate your carbs. For example, one night we had like a steak and a salad, and I didn't have any carbs with that dinner. And then I ate breakfast and didn't have any carbs. I went to work out and realized, dude, I feel horrible. The reason was I went about 18 hours or 14 hours with no carbs, and that was on accident. Now I only had so many carbs available for my workout, as opposed to now if I can time it, I make sure I get something with some carbs before I work out, something after. And if I didn't get enough, maybe that night before or the morning of, because what you had the night before plays an important role too. You can't just think about these in isolation. It's one giant continuum. So what I'll do, a little trick is, and there's some science behind it. It's called glucose rinsing. If you have some glucose in your mouth, you eat something sugary, you get more energy. I'll carry a serving of gummy bears. So 9 gummy bears, 110 calories. And it's something sweet. And so if I don't have carbs, I'll pound those because if I forgot like an idiot, I don't want to ruin my workout. So I'll eat some gummy bears. And for me, it gives me enough energy. Again, semi-scientific tips here to get through the workout. And now whether that's placebo or whether it's actually something physiological, I personally don't care because it got me through the workout. That was the goal and it worked. But having something like a little snack on hand, I keep it in my glove compartment of my car, isn't a bad idea when you're trying to lose weight and you still want to get your workout and you realize, oh, I just totally forgot. I haven't had a carb in a day. And not like you're trying to not do it. You just forgot. Sometimes you're busy and you cut out your pasta. So then you didn't have it for dinner. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, shoot, I'm, way under than I should be.
Yeah. No. And then the other one is like when I'm trying to cut down, one of the big things that I do is I kind of take out starchy carbs. The reason is because I just overeat those things. And so you got to kind of be self-aware is like, okay, I have to take down my calories. Well, what do I eat too much of? And then for me, it is carbs. And then, okay, which carbs do I eat too much of? Breads and bagels. And so for me, I start to kind of move those things out. But what I've done in the past is I kind of fall into that trap of thinking like, I'm only going to get my carbs through fruits and vegetables, and that's it. And it's like, in theory, that makes sense because both of them have carbs and that's great. But then in the real world, day to day, you go train hard, you come back, you're not going to be able to eat enough vegetables and carbs to really refuel. I mean, if you have the dedication to do that and you have the palate that can do that, great, more power to you. But I can't do that. I mean, there's no way, because there's just no way that I can consistently eat. You almost have to be eating all day. If you're going to get it through vegetables, you got to be eating all day. And I don't have the time or the energy to do that. And so I'm better off adding in things like a sweet potato or some rice or something like that, where I'm not necessarily going to overeat as much as I would overeat like processed foods like freaking pizza bagels or something like that. But, I am going to be able to get enough of it to actually refuel. And Dr. Bubbs in one of the podcast episodes was talking about how he encourages processed foods for a lot of his guys because they can eat enough of it like post-game. If you're like completely drained, don't try to go to the healthiest carb source because you're not going to be able to eat enough of it. So he's like, look, I'll load them up with some processed stuff just because they need to resynthesize at that rate. And so that's one way that you can, like, if you're trying to build mass or you need more carbohydrates, don't be afraid of some processed stuff. But like if you're in my case and you're trying to lose weight and get more lean, then you just got to be aware of what you tend to overeat, cut that out. But don't go to the extremes of like, hey, I'm only going to do vegetables. It's not going to work.
And when people do that too, two things. One, if you want to have a little tip in that too, you can add some caffeine with your carbs. That increases your synthesis rate as well. And so if you want to get like, oh, I got a bunch of workouts today, maybe you have your cup of coffee before and then you have a little bit after with your carbs to increase the synthesis rate. And maybe you have a glucose and a fructose, because of fructose, like from fruit, a glucose you might just get from another source, whatever the hell you want to get it from. I don't care, you can have glucose gummies all the way to, actually technically a banana has a good amount of glucose. But the point is, there's different receptors. There's glucose and fructose within the way you absorb it, and they can actually synergistically work to resynthesize glycogen quicker. So if you do a little bit of a mix, it's beneficial as well. And what's interesting, though, when people decide to go on a diet, they go, oh, I'm going to eat tons of vegetables and fruits now. And their gastrointestinal disruption goes way high, because now you're consuming like 800% more fiber than you ever have previously.
It's happened to me for sure. That's definitely happened to me.
Be wary of is all of a sudden people now you're consuming tons and tons of basically insoluble fibers that you hadn't been consuming before, a bunch of seeds and whatever the vegetables you're eating. Maybe you're eating the skin on a potato, and all these aspects that are going on where it's it might be causing a little bit of issues, and there's other things that might come up with it too. And there's a lot of cool little hacks. I hate to use the word hacks, but like apparently, like if you cook a potato and you let it set and it cools, it becomes a resistant starch and changes the glycemic load of it. And that's important too, not to get on a huge tangent. It's a glycemic load versus index. So the glycemic index is if you eat something, it's how fast do those sugars manifest as glucose in the bloodstream. So the example is like white bread's the purest form, but the glycemic load takes into account the index, so the sugars available, but also how much are in it. An example is glycemic index is really high in a carrot, which is why for like a wild carrot's like, oh no, don't eat carrots. But there's actually not that much sugar in the carrot, so the glycemic load is actually pretty small because it's also combined with fiber, versus a glycemic load of a white bread, which is the simplest basically starch out there, is super high because the glycemic index of the carbs themselves are really high, and then there's a lot of it. So you have a high spike in glucose right away. If you think about nutrient timing and you're in a workout, you want something that has a high glycemic index theoretically, because you want those sugars now. You don't want a slow releasing sugar that gets disrupted by fiber and takes a longer time for the get in the bloodstream. So that's the difference between index and load. So if you're trying to do a little bit of a hack to try, oh, what should I eat? It's not just what should I eat a carb here or then, but what kind of carb. Should I have a fast acting carb that has a higher spike in blood glucose because I'm about to bonk right now because I'm getting tired from the workout itself.
Right. And that's another little hack is like you can squeeze in those type of foods post-workout because your body's going to really absorb it. It's searching for quick acting carbs. And so like if you're that person who's like, hey, I need my Captain Crunch, I need it once a day. Well, the best time, if you're going to have it, the best time would be right after that workout. I think your body's going to utilize it much better than like before bed.
I'm also a big fan of during a workout. Like I know people aren't going to sit down and have, a bowl of cereal of Captain Crunch during a workout, but if you're going to have like a candy bar, or you're going to have like gummy bears, like do it during too, because there's some research showing that, if we have, exercise occurring in contractions, we have what's called a glute floor receptor moves to the muscles. And long story short, you have less of an insulin spike. And so there's not as much of a demand there. And there's all these little things involved, like do you puree? Do you drink a smoothie? Because if you drink a smoothie, that makes it a much higher glycemic index, because what you've done, you've diluted the fibers in it. You've blended them up and make them pre-digested. So you have a salad versus a smoothie. The smoothie is actually much more faster acting in terms of how the blood's going to spike. Even for a single fruit, if you take an apple, you eat an apple, you have the skin, and that's great, and that can slow the digestion and the glucose spike, versus apple juice, which is the most concentrated form of apple, spikes your blood glucose. And so you can have these little deviations in the same fruit, an apple, but how it's pureed, the whole apple, or even juiced, really changes how it affects your body.
Right. 100%. Okay. Next one that I've struggled with is overconsumption of caffeine. And I know compared to you, I don't consume that much caffeine. You were definitely impressive when you came out to Newport. What did you average? Was it 6 cups per morning?
No,
it was 4.
That was a little low.
Yeah.
They gave you small. You got to take this. That coffee shop was a little stingy on the cup size.
They were.
It was all in the morning because I was hurting. I wasn't doing too hot, and I died at the end of the whole experience.
You still broke records at that coffee shop, though. You definitely hold the all-time record of most cups of coffee consecutively, day in and day out.
The first day we come in, and I like oat milk. Oat milk is fire with your coffee. So I say, hey, can I get some oat milk with my coffee? And she's like, oh, it's free refills too, blah, blah, blah. So she comes back with oat milk. My coffee's gone. She's like, oh, okay. And then she gives like a little tiny thing of oat milk. And then the next time we come in, she brings out like the bowl. It's like a bowl of oat milk. And she's like, I think you need this one instead.
Right.
And so we're sitting there just, she was like, I've never seen one drinking with coffee before. She was kind of rude about it. I was like, come on, I'm paying for it. Get over it.
Yeah, she was a little rude about it. She was a little rude. Anyways, caffeine. So I think a lot of people can relate to this one because we're all kind of, especially trainers who are trying to bring energy in their sessions, and then they're also working out. So like for me, at one point in time, I think like 2016, I was taking pre-workout for my workout, which that's, maybe 2 or 3 cups of coffee in itself. I was taking a cup of coffee to wake up, but then also I would have these sessions where it's like a really important session and I wanted to bring energy. So I would have more coffee or more pre-workout before that session. And then you calculate the milligrams at the end of the day, and it's like, I should probably be dead right now.
In grams. You calculate it in grams.
In grams, right. So that's one thing that really got to me. And I think that it really took a toll on my health. I think it took a toll on my gains. I think I gained more fat and had a harder time building muscle because I got so high in my caffeine intake. And I think I had a really hard time getting to my parasympathetic nervous system, that rest recovery that we need to be in to actually get gains. Because like anytime that I felt relaxed, it was like, okay, drink more, get hyped up, get ramped up, and keep going. And it was like I was sympathetic all day, and you can't get any type of gains in that state. So there was one point in time, 2016, where James Harden would train with me, but he was in Calabasas, and I was in Orange County. And so that drive takes about 2 hours. So I would drive out here 2 hours, and then I would drive back 2 hours. And so I would leave at probably 4:30 a.m. so that I could beat traffic. So I'd wake up, a couple cups of coffee. I would get there, but he didn't show up until like 9. So I had several hours just to sit in my car. So I would like kind of sit there, kind of antsy from the caffeine, wait for him. By the time he would be showing up, I would be on my crash. And so I would take more pre-workout because I had to be on point. I had to bring energy. So I'd take more pre-workout, go in, do the session, drive all the way back. But then after that 2-hour drive, I was crashing again. And then I'd have like 7 NBA sessions in a row. And I had to bring energy in each one. So between every session, I was going back and I was taking more caffeine. And man, I think I had my worst year of training. I looked like shit at the end of that summer. And ever since then, I started to realize that caffeine, that high levels of caffeine and gains don't mix very well. So now I try to get all of my caffeine at one time. So I still have my morning cup or maybe my 2 morning cups. But if I do that, I'm not also taking a pre-workout for my workout. If I'm relying on energy, now I go to more like apps that help me with breathing. Like there's I don't know the name. I think it's like State or something. And it's an app where I think it might be, yeah. I downloaded that and it kind of takes you through guided breathing. And there's different different ones that you could choose. And one of them is alert. And it just takes you through like 5 minutes of breathing to help you become more alert. And I found that gets me more prepared for my sessions than caffeine does anyways. I'm more like a calm alert instead of a jittery hyper alert. And so that has kind of helped me a lot. And just eating healthy. I mean, getting enough micronutrients, getting my macronutrients. I'm energized through my sessions. And so now I don't feel the need to constantly go back to caffeine. And now I find it's very easy for me to build muscle and lose fat. And I attribute a lot of that to the caffeine intake.
Well, it's interesting because I don't get hit by caffeine. I can drink a lot of caffeine, as you've witnessed, and I don't really get much out of it. I don't get jittery. I don't get hyped up. It's kind of interesting. And I think there's research that genetically people have predispositions to how fast they can churn through caffeine based on, like phase 1, phase 2 detox. I think it was something like that. Your liver, how quickly you can churn it. And so if you're one of those people, and personally, this is just anecdotally, I do better with coffee. I think pre-workout it's fine if you use it appropriately, but that stuff really can hit you. Like that hits you harder than any coffee I've had lots of coffee in my life, and it doesn't really bring me up or down. It's when I start getting pre-workout trained and I start like, oh man, this tastes really good. You got to realize like a pre-workout's got 300 milligrams sometimes. My cup of coffee is 90. I will pee before I get caffeinated off coffee to the point where I will be on a pre-workout kick. And it tastes good too, so I'll have a little bit more. Why not? Because I like my blue raspberry flavor. And so be careful with the pre-workouts specifically. Not saying you don't use them, but just be careful with them.
Well, and there's like 1,000 other things hidden in there that you don't even know you're taking half the time. You look at it like, oh, it's this many milligrams of caffeine, but you forget like all the other crap in there that's not supposed to be in your body.
The system goes all the way on. You see through walls.
Right. Any other big ones that have affected you in the past?
Don't read magazines, man. Like, honestly, because you get in the mood and it's like psychological, like, oh, I'm going to lose weight now. It's time for me to diet. And the next thing you know, you go and you're at a checkout line and it's some like, top 10 dieting tips. And you're like, oh, well, it's science. It's in a magazine. It must be right. And it's just bastardized information. And it's like, eat 19 meals a day, or it's like, don't eat any meals a day. And then there's all these different things. And at the end of it, when it comes to dieting, I think it's relatively simple outside of some of the specifics of like, you get the details of like blood work and what you need to take. Yeah, that stuff's really, really detailed. But at the end of the day, like eat more protein. If you're going to lose weight, you need to eat less calories, or you need to total burn more calories than you consume. So you can either do that by working really hard, which I don't advise, or you can do it by eating a little bit less, which I advise, and also continue to lift heavy, get strong, and stay strong, because you're going to want to maintain your relative strength. And if that's the goal, to lose weight is to express your force even better, then don't be so, taxing your body so poorly that you don't even get the results you want.
Right. 100%. And don't look like what you're talking about. You look at NBA players and you go, oh, well, they're so lean. I got to get that lean. You have very different genetics. And people forget that fat loss is highly genetic. How much can you lose and still feel good and still feel healthy and still perform well? There's a huge genetic component to that. So everybody can lose weight. Everybody can get lean, but it's relatively lean. You can get on the lower end of what your genetics allows for. But look, I got guys who came in the NBA at 11 or 12% body fat, and that's high for caliper for an 18-year-old, considering in the NBA you got guys who are 2% on caliper. But it's like, we know that, they're not going to be the guy that gets down to 5. And so I could be obsessed with like getting them as lean as possible, but there's going to be some downsides. You're going to get some joint pain. You're going to get immune issues, right? You can severely compromise your immune system by going way lower than what your genetics allows for on that body fat percentage. So it's kind of like we have this natural set point, and when you get too far away from that set point, you start getting all these other issues. And so maybe more frequent sickness. All of a sudden, you're missing more games. Dr. Bubbs was mentioning injuries like the Paul George thing. It's very possible that kind of stuff is nutritional. Like I don't know what bone he broke. I think he snapped his tibia. He's like, look, your tibia is not supposed to just snap like that. And so the idea is like over time, it's just these constant, breaking down of that bone because of nutritional deficiencies. And so if you're that person who's looking at the NBA player and saying, I got to get that lean, and you diet your way down there, you might have some bigger issues on the back end. So, remember that there is a genetic component, and get lean. But as soon as you start feeling like crap, you might want to kind of cut back on that and go back to eating maintenance calories.
I agree. And the accumulation, right? We always see the last straw on the camel's back kind of deal. You blame that. No, Paul George landed. He broke his tibia. It must have been landing weird or something. That's silly, man. Like, how many of those other straws added up? Yes, obviously, the physics says the landing is the reason why it broke. sure, it's physics. You can explain it that way. But that's the difference between, the symptom versus the cause kind of situation. It's not causing the landing, didn't really necessarily the reason why it broke, but why wasn't it strong enough to handle the landing like it had for the past 23 years, 24 years? Right. Oh, because it's been an accumulation of small steps backwards, and then eventually you fall off the cliff, right? You keep stacking straws in a camel, that last one breaks its back. Yes, yep. Mathematically speaking, the last one broke its back. But no, it's not the last one's fault. It's all the other ones as well.
Right. 100%. And that's my whole story as a basketball player. Every November, I broke a bone. Every November, consecutively for, I think, 5 or 6 years straight. And at the time, it's like, oh, well, I'm just so unlucky. And then you look back and you're like, oh, actually, my diet wasn't on point. I could have been eating way better. I might have not been eating enough calories for how much I was burning because I was obsessed with skills training. So I was on the court for several hours every single day and probably not refueling. I didn't get out in the sun. I was in the classroom and I was in the gym all day. So I had severe vitamin D deficiencies. And so my bones probably weren't as strong or I wasn't using calcium the way I should be. And so I might have some bone problems because of that. And so when you look at injuries, I think nutrition is kind of where you start. I mean, we're all obsessed with like mechanics. Mechanics are tough to change by the time you get on the court in a competitive environment. So we can make some good changes to your landing mechanics in a controlled environment. Are those going to carry over? 90% of the time, no. Because once you get into that real competitive environment, you're going to go to what works best for performance. And that's not always like this controlled, safe version of landing. But if our physiology is where it needs to be, we're going to be durable for those type of landings. But if your nutrition or your sleep is not on point, that's where you start to have the injuries. And then we all look at the mechanics. But like you said, a lot of times that's something else. It's just the final straw that broke the camel's back.
Exactly. It's very complicated. That is the simple answer.
That's what it all comes down to is it's very complicated. Right. 100%. All right, I got to go train Carol Baskin. I got to go launch my I got to go get her on Vert Code 3.0, so I got to get out of here. Man. All right, that was some good stuff. Appreciate you being on. What do we got coming up on Edge U? Any big talks coming up? I know we got the machine one coming up soon.
On Dr. Medvedev out of Russia. 1961, the origins of contract relax. Ooh. I'm gonna dive through that, the original data. We're gonna talk about it and what it means and how we can apply it into our training. I got another big talk lined up in signs and symptoms of how to treat athletic development as if you're in a healthcare world, which is a kind of a cool, fun thought process, the way you can start looking at how people develop qualities and strengths. And, am I treating a symptom? Oh, this guy isn't elastic, so I have him do plyos. But maybe that's not the right reason. We got to treat the cause. And so maybe he does need to do plyos once he builds his strength up. So we'll dive into that as well. And we have some fun, unique stuff coming as well, where Paul is going to be demonstrating some of the machines versus not machined exercises. We have some plyometric discussions on how much is too much in regards to volume. And we're going to be listening to you guys.
One of the things that I've gotten a lot of feedback from MLB strength coaches, NBA strength coaches, one of the things they're like, dude, it fits my schedule so well. And they're like, look, I can spend 30 minutes every morning, like while I'm having breakfast or whatever it is, and just crank through 2 Edge U presentations, and it fits their schedule so well, and they're learning a variety of different topics. And so that's kind of the feedback that we've gotten from the high level side, and then from the guys who are like, look, I'm a college kid. I'm studying exercise science. I don't know that much, but there's still a lot of relatable information which have, a direct action, and you can improve your workouts. Or if you're training people on the side, you can improve their workouts. And there's been a couple comments that they're like, hey, I've learned more practical knowledge than I've learned in my entire 4-year exercise science degree. And that's kind of our goal, is to be able to make this platform that you learn that much from, but it's $1 a day or even less than $1 a day instead of spending $60,000 on college.
Absolutely. We made something that we wish we had when we were learning. That's as simple as it is, and it's made to help you learn. School's made to help you pass tests. We don't have tests. We share what we're learning, and we wanted to make it engaging and educational for you.
Right. 100%. All right, my man. Until next time, we're out. All right, my squids. I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. Thanks to Max for bringing the heat, as always. Look, if you want to check out Edge U, Max and I put a lot of effort into this. We put in almost daily uploads, and it's not just like surface level stuff. We're going deep on the science, but we also give business tips, practical advice for trainers. There's a lot of really good content on there that you can benefit from. So if you're a trainer, if you're a coach, even if you're a skills coach and you're running your own business, I think EdgeU is a great investment for you. Even if you're a college kid or a high school kid who's looking to get into this industry in the future, why not get ahead of the game and start taking your education to the next level today? So you could check us out at theedgeu.com, or you could go to pjfperformance.net and click on the training tab and then click EdgeU. I'll see you guys next time. I'm out.